Amazing transformation. CEO discovered a hidden waitress sleeping. What happens next is incredible. David stepped out of the elevator and into his gleaming office on the top floor of the sleek high-rise. But a dull ache in his chest reminded him that nobody truly understood the relentless pressure he faced. The accolades, the wealth, unimportant. A board meeting had left him drained, drowned out by the booming suits seeking ever greater profits. Each voice in the room, once a symphony of ideas, now felt like nails on a chalkboard. But as he drifted home that night, aimless thoughts gnawed at him. Why was he pushing so hard? To what end? The flickering neon outside a small diner caught his eye. He slid into a booth, the scent of burnt coffee and greasy food oddly calming. As he nursed his cup, his gaze fell upon a figure curled up in a booth, a waitress still trapped in her apron, surrounded by plates and mugs. She wore the exhaustion visible on her face. Something about her struck a chord within David. Was it empathy or envy? Her life contrasted sharply with his extravagant existence. Yet he felt an unspoken bond emerge. He returned to the diner night after night, drawn to her quiet strength. Her name was Sarah. He learned that much. At first, she regarded him with caution, her eyes narrowing as he engaged her in light, harmless conversation. There was a weight in her voice when she finally began to share the story she carried within. A brilliant mathematician with dreams as vast as the city surrounding them, yet bound by the chains of responsibility. Navigating a world where doors were often slammed in her face, she revealed the layers of resilience beneath the worn apron. David felt a thrill every time her laughter pierced the din of the diner. Those moments felt electric, a stark contrast to the cold boardroom conversations he was used to. He had been the highest of the high, yet there she was, lighting up his dark tunnel of ambition with her simple, genuine hopes. He wanted to help her, to protect her fire from being extinguished by corporate indifference. But the closer he got, the more the shadows of doubt crept in. Were his motives selfish? Was he merely using her brilliance to fill the vacancy in his own life? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. As David leveraged his connections to introduce her to new opportunities, he felt the distance between their worlds tightening. The cutthroat nature of the corporate landscape reared its head. One of his rivals, an ambitious predator in the business world, sniffed out his growing bias towards Sarah, brandishing it like a weapon against David. A gnawing fear gripped David. Was he ready to battle for someone else's dream while risking his reputation? The stakes rose higher, and the weight of their choices loomed ominously. The trust they forged now felt like a fragile glass, easily shattered by whispered betrayals and competing agendas. David's heart raced at the thought of losing her, yet he couldn't ignore the cruel twist that would arise from severing that delicate bond. As the diner's neon light flickered like the uncertain dawn of possibility outside, David faced a crossroads. In this moment, could he stand tall against the raging currents of corporate ambivalence to protect someone he had come to view as family? Desperation welled within him, gnawing at the edges of his ambition like a predator hunting an unsuspecting prey. In this charged atmosphere of conflicting ideals, he hovered on the brink of transformation both for himself and for Sarah. But would it be enough? David's mind raced as he sat at his polished desk in the high-rise. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue across the city, and yet he felt a gnawing unease deep within. It was like staring into an abyss of conflict, where ambition clashed with morality. He needed to act, but was filled with trepidation about the consequences. He thought of Sarah, her quiet determination igniting a spark of purpose in him. How had he come to care so deeply for someone he barely knew? But she wasn't just a waitress. She was a symbol of potential unbridled by the corporate world's relentless machinery. Her struggles mirrored the thoughts that haunted him, the feeling of being trapped despite appearing to be at the pinnacle of success. Was it time to disrupt the status quo? David's phone buzzed, an unwelcome reminder of the corporate pressure closing in. It was a message from his rival, an attempt to undermine him further in front of the board. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer, he reminded himself, stifling the urge to retaliate. Instead, he chose to reach out to Sarah. If he was indeed going to fight for her, he needed to do it smartly and strategically. That evening, he sat in the diner booth across from her, the aroma of coffee swirling between them. He shared his thoughts openly, vulnerability threading through his otherwise polished exterior. Sarah listened, her brow furrowing in contemplation, reflecting the empathy he had grown to admire. You can fight back, David. This isn't just about me. You're a part of a system that needs changing, she said, her voice steady. Use your position to break that system. Help others like me. Her words ignited something fierce within him, a resolve that had been flickering like the diner's neon lights. Could he really wield his power for something beyond profits? Yes, there was risk involved, but the thought of tempering ambition with altruism was invigorating. Driven by an urgency he had long ignored, David reached out to his board the next day, proposing a new initiative, a mentorship program aimed at uplifting untapped talent in underserved communities. The room buzzed with skepticism. Heads shook, and voices challenged him, branding the idea too costly and risky. Yet, David stood firm, rallying his thoughts, fueled by Sarah's fire. He presented statistics about unfulfilled potential and the corporate responsibility to invest in the community. This is about more than our bottom line, he insisted, feeling his own voice strengthen. It's about integrity. It's about transforming lives. As the board deliberated, David fought the instinct to retreat into his polished persona. Instead, he infused his pitch with his own story, sharing his gradual shift from profit-centric leadership to a model focused on empowerment and growth. Back at the diner later that week, David eagerly awaited Sarah's reaction. He shared the updates, detailing how he had emphasized the need for mentorship and how he hoped to recruit from her community. But as her eyes widened, something in his gut twisted. Would she think he was merely trying to save his own skin? Are you doing this for me or for yourself? She asked bluntly. Her question hung in the air like smoke, and he wrestled with the truth. Was he using her as a stepping stone to redefine himself? His determination faltered briefly as he faced the discomfort of reflection, but then conviction surged back. This was an opportunity to enact real change. If David could succeed, it wouldn't merely reflect his ambition, but would uplift countless others. With that realization anchoring his resolve, he leaned forward. I'm doing it for all of us, Sarah. I want to fight for your dream, for my redemption. As a smile crept onto her face, David felt a flicker of hope that perhaps this journey wouldn't just transform Sarah's life, but unravel layers of himself hidden behind the facade of wealth and success. The fight was far from over, and looking back at the realm of boardrooms and their walls, he knew a confrontation loomed. Would he persuade the board to embrace change, or would he become just another casualty of ambition? The stakes had been raised, and the moment had come. The true battle for his values was about to begin. As David walked into the boardroom, the weight of uncertainty threatened to crush him. The air buzzed with whispers, some mocking his proposal, while others feigned interest. He gripped the edges of the table, leaning slightly forward as he faced the board members, their expectant gazes piercing through him. The skepticism was palpable, yet beneath that pressure lay a silent determination to prove them wrong. Gentlemen, he began, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. I appreciate your feedback on the mentorship initiative. Allow me to present our potential investment through a different lens. It's about long-term growth beyond the usual metrics of profit. His heart raced as he paced the front of the room, channeling the energy gleaned from Sarah's encouragement. Each statistic he shared felt like a lifeline, igniting a flicker of hope within him. He cited success stories of companies flourishing because they dare to look beyond their immediate stakeholders. Still, the silence that followed his passionate pitch felt heavy, as if the very walls were closing in. One board member, a seasoned executive with a bull-like build, leaned back, arms folded. "David, your idealism is commendable, but let's not forget the bottom line. Your proposal could cost us financially and reputationally." There it was. The word cost struck a nerve. David sensed the familiar urge to retreat, a voice in his mind whispering that this fight was futile. But something deeper surged, an overwhelming realization sparked by Sarah's faith in him. "It's not a cost. It's an investment," he countered, feeling a resolve tighten around his intention. "The communities we aim to uplift are brimming with talent, just waiting for the opportunity to shine. We're not saving them. We're enabling them and ourselves." The boardroom, once a bastion of skepticism, shifted imperceptibly. He could see the board members exchanging glances, their carefully curated expressions wavering. A question formed in David's mind. Could he turn this confrontation into a rally cry for change? Yet with every fiery assertion came the shadow of self-doubt. If he couldn't convince them, what would it mean for him? Reflecting on Sarah's earlier question, he pressed deeper. Was he truly advocating for others, or grappling with his desire for redemption? Before he could lose his momentum, he pointed at one of the younger members present, a recently promoted director who had shown flashes of progressive thinking. "You there, what do you see when you look at our talent acquisition strategy?" Caught off guard, she stammered, searching for the right words. It's outdated. We miss out on diverse applicants." "Exactly," he interjected, infused with urgency. "We're neglecting potential that exists right under our noses. Imagine nurturing talent from those communities, helping them break the cycle of poverty while enriching our company. Is that not a mark of true leadership?" A murmur cascaded through the room, a seismic shift in perception. He could sense that some were reconsidering their previous stances, but the formidable executive glared at David, unmoved. "You may be laying these ideas out, but let us be real. Can you deliver tangible results? Can you guarantee this will not backfire?" David felt the heat rise within him. This was the moment to strip away the polished veneer. "No, I can't guarantee success, but I can assure you of my commitment to this cause. I'm willing to lead this initiative personally, demonstrating that our values can align with our actions." The silence that followed was electric, charged with possibilities and hidden anxieties. David knew he was on the precipice of either his largest failure or a transformative victory. It was not merely about the board's decision. It was his own internal battle with fear and ambition, and the crescendo of his burgeoning self-awareness. With the meeting reaching a critical juncture, a thought crossed his mind. What if he was laying too much on the line? Was he truly ready to fight for this path? As he faced the board, his heart raced, each beat echoing a singular resolution. Whatever the outcome, this initiative could become his legacy. The moment for clarity arrived, and he understood. Every battle in life, whether won or lost, was a course in personal evolution. Suddenly, a voice broke the tension, a new member, someone who had kept silent until now. "I'm intrigued by this vision." But power dynamics shifted in the room once more as David braced for the long-awaited confrontation. The time had come to face the board's full wrath, and only then would he uncover the true transformation awaiting him, one that could redefine not only his career but his entire being. David stood at the threshold of confrontation, his heart beating like war drums. The new voice echoed in his mind, constructively disruptive, yet laden with anticipation, but lingered in the air, tantalizingly unresolved. He faced the board members again, their expressions a mosaic of curiosity and skepticism. The young executive had unknowingly gifted him a lifeline, an opening to redirect the tide. "What is it?" he urged, leaning forward slightly, feeling the energy shift. He could almost taste the possibility of momentum, of transforming doubts into determination. She hesitated for a second, visibly torn. "I like where you're going with this, but we're already stretched thin with our resources." How do you plan to overcome those barriers, especially in a market that values immediate returns? An unexpected wave of relief washed over him. Her question wasn't an outright rejection. It was a call to delve deeper. Great point. It's critical to balance ambition with feasibility, David responded, his mind racing to articulate a plan that mirrored both idealism and practicality. What if we pilot the initiative with a smaller investment, focusing on just a couple of targeted areas? That way, we can measure outcomes without jeopardizing our current operations. Now he was gaining traction, positioning each point as not just a response, but part of a cohesive strategy. He continued, energizing himself as he spoke. By collaborating with local organizations, we could also offset some costs. Plus, we'd open our brand to a pool of untapped talent and new perspectives. This isn't merely about altruism. It's about revitalizing our entire pipeline. It generates loyalty, community support, and ultimately, revenue. David could see heads nodding, albeit cautiously. He felt emboldened, but still hyper-aware of the heavyweight executive across the table. The man's grim visage told him all he needed to know about the opposition he still faced. You're committing to a paradigm shift, David. And what if this fails? The board may not have the appetite for risk now. The shot came, direct and untreated, and David realized the man was terrified of change. What if it succeeds? He countered with newfound firmness. What if we create a model that others can replicate? Instead of letting fear dictate our decisions, we could lead the industry into a new era of corporate responsibility and innovation. He encountered a hushed response, a spell of contemplation enveloping the room. The urgency cut through the air like a knife. David sensed an internal passion tightening in his chest. This was his battle for not just a vision, but for self-respect and validation. The internal debate within himself intensified. Would he remain tethered to past failures, or would he embrace this as a defining moment of courage? He turned to the young director again, hoping to catch fire from her previous momentum. What else do you need to see to feel secure in this direction? He asked, softening his tone. Her expression turned contemplative, the gears in her mind visibly working. Well, if we could establish some key performance indicators to gauge our success in the pilot, yes, he exclaimed, charging the conversation with energy. They could do this, and he could feel the electric energy shifting. I'll collaborate with HR and create measurable outcomes. Attendance rates, engagement metrics, or success could be tangible and visible. The executive opposite him chuckled derisively. You think a few numbers will shield us from backlash? We must consider the narrative as well. David leaned back momentarily, absorbing the weight of the opposition. Every significant change in history faced opposition, yes. It takes time to forge a new narrative, but every powerful story shifts the prevailing culture. Isn't that worth the risk? He paused, the room still buzzing with uncertainty, internal strife ripe for the taking. Could he galvanize them not just into submission, but into belief? With a final resolute determination, he added, if we can stand behind these values and achieve successful outcomes, we redefine what leadership means not just for ourselves, but for generations to come. As he finished, a lingering silence reconvened, thick with implications. The weight of what lay ahead pressed on him, but there was light glimmering through the thick clouds of fear. Would the board stand with him or against him? Would they embrace the storm of transformation about to unfold? And before he could lose himself in thought, the seasoned executive leaned forward, a glint of something. Was it curiosity? Concern? Debate? Flickering in his eyes. We need to discuss this further, David. But understand, you're treading on significant ground. A breath caught in David's throat, aware of the precarious path that lay ahead and how it traveled far beyond this boardroom. Was he ready to fully invest himself in this fight, embracing his burgeoning sense of purpose? The stakes were rising, and with them, the undeniable truth every moment counted, and not just for the proposal's sake, but for his own awakening as an agent of change. He sensed the impending storm brewing yet realized this was only the beginning of his renaissance. Yet behind the atmosphere of burgeoning hope, a lurking doubt loomed. What unforeseen challenges awaited him in the next meeting, and could he truly navigate this evolving labyrinth of ambition and fear, becoming the leader he was meant to be? The following days unfolded with an intoxicating mix of anticipation and trepidation. David found himself replaying the board meeting in his mind, dissecting every nuance, every raised eyebrow, and muted response. It was a dance of influence that thrummed in his veins. With every step forward, he felt the gnawing heaviness of responsibility tethering him. Yet at the same time, a burgeoning confidence coiled like a spring deep inside. Each morning, he pored over industry reports and trends, arming himself with data to potentially bolster his proposal further. There was a sharp clarity in this pursuit. His desire for transformation dovetailed with a hunger for validation. This duality both inspired him and sparked a flare of anxiety. Was he forging ahead out of genuine passion or merely seeking approval? The question haunted him, but within it lay a route for growth. Throughout the week, he engaged openly with his team, launching informal brainstorming sessions. As they tossed ideas back and forth, a surprising bond began to form. David observed how collaborative energy sparked innovation, revealing talents in his colleagues he hadn't fully appreciated before. Every suggestion that landed on the table added another layer, reinforcing his vision. Yet the whispers within him also grew louder. His colleagues, though enthusiastic, whispered to the executive's hesitations. The shadows of skepticism were palpable, and David couldn't escape the feeling that one well-placed comment could unravel the momentum they built. Would his allies stand firm when their necks were on the line? The next board meeting loomed, a specter of potential confrontation. As he prepared, David consciously reminded himself of the risks inherent in passion-driven pursuits. Growth often demanded confronting deep-seated fears. He practiced laying out progress metrics, attendance figures, employee engagement, and qualitative feedback from the pilot initiative. But how would he navigate the emotional undercurrents? On the day of the meeting, he approached the boardroom with surprising resolve. As he entered, the tension struck him like a physical presence. There they were, each member embodying the ambivalence of either support or conflict. "Thank you for gathering," David began, an unmistakable edge in his voice. "I'm eager to discuss the metrics we've established and further refine our approach." He presented his findings. The initial enthusiasm from the pilot had yielded promising engagement metrics. Support was there. It existed as intangible energy, evident in the numbers, but yet to transform into faith. However, he braced for the inevitable counterstrike. The heavyweight executive leaned in, brow furrowed, each word edged with skepticism. "David, while engagement is critical, what do you say to the fear that metrics can't capture the narratives that will arise from failure? You speak of success, but what of the damage? Failure is a part of any meaningful endeavor," he countered, feeling the adrenaline pulse behind each syllable. "But in our fear of it, we restrict our potential for growth. We must learn to embrace uncertainty as an intrinsic element of innovation. The real danger lies in inaction." David's heartbeat quickened. He sensed the atmosphere coiling tighter with each passing moment. Had he struck the right chord, or merely provoked deeper skepticism? The board was nodding, but he could feel defensiveness lurk just beneath the surface, as if he were walking on a taut wire stretched across their fears. He decided to bolster his argument with a recent success story from a competitor or rival who had taken similar risks and thrived amid backlash. "We have the opportunity to position ourselves as pioneers. We could elevate our brand to unprecedented heights based on our commitment to transformative change." As the board members exchanged glances, David read their expressions like an open book. Curiosity tinged with caution. They were at the brink, caught between potential support and a latent fear of misstep. But was he misreading it all? What if their reluctance wasn't simply about risk, but rather a deep-seated fear of the implications of change? Would he be doubting himself the same way he feared they were doubting him? Just as the tension reached a palpable peak, the young director who had first spoken up raised her hand. What if we further diversify our approach? Incorporate feedback from all our departments, not just marketing? Her voice carried an infectious enthusiasm, an invitation for collaboration that breathed fresh life into the room. David felt the pulse of hope quicken his steps as he seized this as an opportunity. Exactly. If we engage department heads, everyone needs a stake in this vision. We can frame our growth narrative as collective, not just top-down directives. As he rallied his team behind him, the cracks of uncertainty began to erode. Yet amidst the undercurrent of engagement, doubt simmered. Before he could revel in the moment, the heavyweight executive's expression clouded over once more. David, you must be vigilant about how deviations from our traditional paths could resonate with our stakeholders. There are many expectations to manage. The looming pressure of unyielding expectations bore down on him like an anvil. He sensed this wasn't just about the proposal anymore. It was the test of his very resolve. Would he remain adaptable enough to champion real change amidst the storm of opposition? As he concluded the meeting, the board displayed a cautious optimism, pledging to delve further into his proposal. Yet, David left with heightened awareness beyond the metrics, beyond the excitement. The true challenge lay ahead. Would he have the stomach to navigate the tensions between ambition and fear? Would the next steps yield the clarity he sought? Or would they plunge him deeper into the complexities of leading a change he'd both dared to envision and feared to execute? The weight of these questions stirred in him as he stepped into the corridor. The uncertainty of what lay ahead felt like both a burden and a beacon. He realized then, this wasn't simply a corporate journey. It was an odyssey of self-discovery unraveling in real time, with paths branching into the unknown. And as he faced the glass-paneled doors leading into the bustling world beyond, David wondered, would the next meeting be a breakthrough or a breaking point? David's footsteps echoed through the corridor as he contemplated the tangled web of doubts and aspirations spun inside him. The aftermath of the board meeting lingered like a specter, each note of cautious optimism accompanied by an intrusive line of questions demanding answers he was not yet ready to provide. Every encounter leading up to the next presentation would be laden with the weight of expectation. How could he communicate the urgency for change while appeasing those chained to tradition? In the days that followed, David found himself more consumed than ever with strategic analysis. He immersed himself in case studies, seeking inspiration and insight from organizations that had weathered transformational storms. What worked? What failed spectacularly? Each piece of data sharpened his focus, yet the overarching anxiety tangled with each revelation. As he scrutinized the paths of others, unsettling questions crept in. What if he became a cautionary tale, a name synonymous with failure? During a particularly restless night, David experienced a sharp moment of clarity. He envisioned the company not just as a structure of departments, but as a living entity responding to change. The blinking cursor on his laptop became a reflection of his internal conflict. Was he merely a custodian of the status quo, or was he bold enough to redefine its essence? He could no longer conflate approval with success. He had to navigate forward with authenticity. This conviction ignited a fire in him, fueling his desire to innovate beyond what was expected. He mapped out a framework for an upcoming presentation, intrigued by the prospect of engaging not only the board but every layer of the company. This was not just about metrics and results. It was a rallying cry for shared ownership. He reached out to colleagues and leaders in different departments, setting up one-on-one dialogues. Understanding their fears, suggestions, and perspectives became a priority, and the vulnerability of these discussions fostered an unexpected camaraderie. Unbeknownst to him, others began to recognize the quiet strength he was cultivating within his leadership style. Rather than assuming the role of a solitary captain, David became a facilitator, merging diverse voices into a collective vision. Each conversation illuminated hidden competencies within himself and those around him, unearthing a collaborative spirit that had long lain dormant. He realized the path ahead lay not solely in his hands, but within the broader network of the team. But as the week waned, David felt the old whispers echoing once more. What if he loses their trust? What if the board dismisses the collective approach? Doubt twisted itself into a choking grip as he prepared to present in front of his colleagues a culmination of his resolve, vulnerability, and newfound insights. He practiced fervently, rehearsing his breathing as much as his words, reminding himself that each meeting was a crucial opportunity not merely to convince, but to inspire. The day of presentation dawned, and David stood before an audience that had now shifted from mere board members to a mosaic of expectations and allies. As he began to speak, he felt an unfamiliar steadiness in his voice and encompassing recognition that he was no longer alone in this fight. Then there came that moment, that vital turning point, as David leaned into a provocative question. What if our success wasn't team measured solely by numbers, but by how we adapt to our community's needs? His tone radiated an earnest truth backed by weeks of arduous reflection. Dialogue sparked, and as the energy in the room shifted, he felt the old uncertainty begin to dissipate, revealing a profound moment of connection, the kind that ran deeper than any transitional change previously imagined. But as he navigated this pivotal exchange, instinctively aware of tentative spirits weighing the merits of his vision, an unsettling realization clawed back into focus. The heavyweight executive, the looming presence that had questioned him before, leaned forward once more there, gaze piercing with practiced scrutiny. David, they began slowly, the tension sharpening as silence enveloped the room. Have you considered what it truly means to lead through change? Will you be prepared for the pushback? In that moment, David confronted the gravity of the stakes at play. Could he navigate not just the boldness of change, but also the inevitable fallout that might follow? He gathered his thoughts, suddenly convinced of a necessity for candor, both with himself and those who looked to him for guidance. As he formulated a response, the very dynamics of leadership echoed in his mind. A transformation could be successful only if its forerunner was ready to embrace the tumult without retreating into self-doubt. Would he fully embrace the responsibility that came with his vision, or would fear derail the journey he had begun? Fingers trembling slightly, he realized that traversing the path of uncertainty was not a flaw, but rather a cornerstone of genuine leadership, one that would forge his growth into a beacon for others. A decision loomed ahead, a defining moment of truth, a breakthrough, or yet another stalling point on his evolving odyssey. Would he rise to confront the challenge of uncharted waters, or would he hesitate, allowing the specter of indecision to overshadow the enthusiasm he had ignited? David inhaled deeply, grounding himself as he considered the executive's penetrating gaze. The gravity of the moment unraveled around him. He could feel the weight of expectations coiling tighter, but he pushed against it. His heart raced with a blend of fear and determination, the remnants of doubt flickering in the edges of his mind. Absolutely, he finally replied, conscious of the growing murmur in the room. Leading through change isn't just about strategy, it's about understanding how those strategies affect people's lives. It means navigating discomfort and resistance, knowing that they are all part of the transformation we're pursuing. The words rolled off his tongue with a firmness he wasn't sure he possessed a moment prior. As he settled into his response, he began to feel the energy transition. The exchange had shifted from antagonism to an unexpected dialogue. I understand that change can spark fear and uncertainty, he continued, calling on the stories he had gathered from his conversations with colleagues. But what we face isn't just about numbers. It's about redefining our narrative as a team. It's acknowledging our strengths and weaknesses while elevating our potential together. David's resolve solidified as heads nodded in the audience, the whispers of approval rising, slowly diluting the tension that once charged the air. For the first time, he recognized that this undertaking was not solely his. It was a shared journey, and he was simply the one with the map. A voice interrupted his reflection. And how do you propose we address the pushback from those who resist this vision? It was the same voice from before, the heavyweight executive, their brow furrowed, challenging him to take a stand. "That's a crucial question," David replied, feeling a tide of adrenaline surge. "We must create safe spaces for those concerns. It's essential to listen and validate fears while showing how we can adapt beyond comfort zones. Real leadership is about fostering an environment where every voice is heard, not sidelined. Resistance isn't a barrier. It's an invitation to iterate together." As he watched the audience's expressions morph from skepticism to contemplation, David felt a surge of empowerment swell within him. He had taken a risk to be vulnerable, acknowledging the reality of change. But with that openness came a growing awareness of his own evolution. This was a chance for him not only to lead, but to embody the very principles he was advocating. After the presentation, lingering conversations filled the room with palpable energy. Colleagues approached him, eager to discuss the ideas he had ignited. Their voices, once hesitative, now echoed with newfound resolve. In that space, he saw reflections of his own path illuminated through theirs. Every single person was instrumental in shaping the company's future. Yet despite the spark ignited by success, shadows lingered in the back of David's mind. What if their collective spirit was fleeting? What if they didn't sustain this momentum against the tide of tradition? Later, after sending a round of thank you emails, David closed his office door, feeling the weight of his responsibilities resonate like a persistent hum. His thoughts spiraled back to the heavyweight executive. They hadn't truly challenged him without a reason, and their presence carried a sense of duty he wasn't prepared to fully understand. The pushback was coming not just from within the organization, but from himself, the internal conflict of embracing this role of leadership while grappling with fears of inadequacy. As he contemplated these looming challenges, a realization struck him. Maintaining trust and fostering collaboration would require continuous, honest communication. He considered proposing regular meetings to align expectations and share insights openly. However, the fight was just beginning. It was no longer about champions or solitary figures. It was about weaving a tapestry of collective resolve, a shift that would demand equally daring choices from others. That night, as David set his alarm, his heart raced at the thought of what lay ahead. The real test was not just whether he could lead effectively, but also how he would respond when confronted with dissent, be it from the board, his colleagues, or indeed the shadow of self-doubt that loomed ever-present. Could he harness the humility to learn from opposition while standing firm in his vision? The next chapter of his journey loomed ahead, filled with unpredictability and the promise of personal growth. He turned out the light, ready for tomorrow's challenges, to unveil new layers of himself he had yet to explore. Just as he drifted into a restless sleep, the question lingered: would he have the courage to stand firm, even when the storm surged against him? The morning light filtered through the blinds, slicing into David's consciousness and draping the room in a gentle glow. Yet sleep found no refuge in him. His thoughts buzzed like a hive, relentless and demanding. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, grounding himself with the rhythm of his heart, steady yet frenetic. Today he would engage directly with the dissent that loomed on the horizon, the engine of transformation that could either propel him or derail his efforts. Over coffee, he planned each statement, each response, as if charting a course through uncharted waters. What would he say to those who questioned his authority? Who would stand with him, and who might oppose him? The breakfast table transformed into a battlefield of ideas, where he strived to anticipate every conceivable challenge. Arriving at the office, he noted the atmosphere a blend of anticipation and skepticism. Colleagues exchanged glances, equal parts hopeful and apprehensive. David understood that this environment was a reflection of his own internal struggle. If he were to ignite change, he first had to radiate confidence, even if he felt uncertain. Stepping into the conference room, he felt the weight of their gazes, an energy palpable in the charged air. "Thank you for gathering," he said, his voice breaking slightly as apprehension painted his words. Yet, even in that falter, he saw opportunity. Vulnerability had its strength. I want to open this space for dialogue about the changes ahead. I recognize that many of you have concerns, and I want us to address those directly. The honesty in his tone drew their attention, a faint crack in the skepticism that had surrounded him. As he encouraged colleagues to voice their thoughts, he prepared himself for resistance. Would they challenge him? Would they critique his vision? The first raised hand came from Sarah, their senior project manager, who had been a linchpin in the organization's previous successes. Her apprehension mirrored his own. "David, how can we trust this direction when past changes haven't stuck?" Her words struck a nerve, awakening a wave of memories. Past initiatives had indeed faltered, leaving scars on the organizational landscape. "You're right, Sarah," he responded, feeling the gravity of her question. "Trust needs to be rebuilt. I can't do this alone, and I want to ask you to jump blindly into the unknown. Instead, let us find a way to embrace our concerns and make this a collaborative endeavor." Some nodded cautiously. Others still seemed entrenched, their arms crossed, as if guarding against a breach of faith. Every pushback stirred an eagerness in David, a thirst to prove that change could turn inevitable friction into an opportunity for evolution. Each voice mattered. With every question, the path to transparency grew clearer. As the meeting progressed, a subtle shift began to morph the atmosphere. Hesitant voices turned into ideas, dissent turned into dialogue. Real solutions were emerging, stronger for being born from discomfort. Yet in the back of his mind, the threat of anxiety remained. Would this newfound participation hold once they left the conference room? After the meeting wrapped up, David lingered in the conference space, pondering the reactions. While a few still expressed reluctance, the momentum was building. People were engaging, but the momentary swell of optimism quickly clashed with shadows of doubt. What if he misread their enthusiasm? What if the discussions faded into silence once they faced external pressures and habitual resistance? He dashed off notes reflecting on today's revelations, each conversation a potential blueprint for sustainable change. In his haste, an idea sparked within him. What if he invited influential dissenters to share their concerns more openly, not as adversaries, but as invaluable allies in the narrative of change? As his pen scratched the notepad, the alarm on his phone buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. A message lit up the screen, showing the heavyweight executive had requested a follow-up meeting. The tension that had begun to settle cranked back to a tight knot in his stomach. With speculation of their motives dancing in his mind, he couldn't shake a lingering doubt. Could he maintain the momentum he had just begun to cultivate, or would this executive challenge him to the breaking point? Determined, yet anxious, David clenched his jaw, his resolve hardening. The brewing storm was imminent, and he needed a strategy, one that would fortify his stance while inviting collaboration. Would he rise to the occasion, facing both the executive and his own emerging fears? The answer loomed before him, and as he readied himself for the next step, one question echoed in his thoughts. What hidden truths could unravel when he confronted the forces pushing back against his vision? David sat in his office, the cool blue of the late afternoon seeping through half-drawn blinds, casting long shadows across the desk littered with papers. The phone call from the heavyweight executive had hung heavily in the air, the tone businesslike yet coated in an underlying challenge. He could feel the walls closing in, and with them, the voices of doubt that whispered through his mind. How could he convince someone with as much clout as this executive that his vision was valid, let alone necessary? He took a deep breath, trying to steady the tremors in his chest. Quickly jotting down a list of key points, he scrutinized each one. He needed to communicate not just the need for change, but also the potential futures they could build together. The words must resonate deeply, inducing trust where skepticism had flourished. Focus on collaboration, he muttered to himself, a mantra against the waves of uncertainty. Show them our progress. As he looked over the notes, a realization struck him. What if his insecurities were part of the very strength he was trying to wield? Could vulnerability be a bridge instead of a barrier? Stepping out from behind the desk and moving toward the large glass window, He focused on the view as city understated yet vibrant, each skyrise a testament to the ingenuity of countless professionals pushing against the tide. A stark reminder that he was not alone. Others had traversed this path and emerged stronger. The notion ignited a flicker of resolve within him. As the meeting time approached, he felt the apprehension morph into something sharper: determination. He would embrace the element of surprise. He began envisioning the meeting not simply as a confrontation, but as a dialogue, a chance to forge alliances even among critics. David needed to enter this meeting assuming goodwill, not just anticipating opposition. If anything, the executive had to recognize the potential brilliance that lay hidden within the dissent. Arriving at the conference room, he steadied himself, recalling the warmth of the exchange during the earlier meeting. He allowed a smile to creep onto his face as he remembered each colleague who had contributed. They were beginning to trust him, and now he needed that same level of faith from the executive. The door opened, and David stepped inside. The executive sat at the far end, an imposing presence draped in a tailored suit. The air was tense with high-stakes potential. "Thank you for taking the time," David began, forcing a calmness into his voice despite its quiver. "I'd like to talk about our vision and how we can collectively navigate the challenges ahead." The executive regarded him coolly, his eyes assessing, perhaps calculating. "David, I've been following the recent discussions within your team. Change is a delicate matter, especially after those past initiatives failed to ground themselves properly. Convince me why this will be different." Each word felt like a blade, cutting through the shifting winds of doubt. "I understand the hesitation. We've had missteps, certainly. But this time, we're not just inviting change. We're constructing it collaboratively. I want dissenters to be our greatest allies." A quick flicker of surprise crossed the executive's face, but it was gone before David could gauge its meaning. Sensing an opportunity, he pressed ahead. "I've witnessed firsthand that discomfort can be a catalyst for growth. It's a place where valuable ideas arise. Together, we can shape skepticism into a framework of innovation." The executive leaned back, fingers steepled, revealing nothing. David fought the urge to fill the silence with desperate words. Instead, he allowed the implications of his sentiments to settle, creating space for contemplation. Minutes stretched out, and David's confidence began to wane under the oppressive weight of the executive's gaze. "And if you're wrong?" the executive forced out, testing the boundaries of David's resolve. The question hung palpably in the air, an ultimatum shrouded in doubt. But it ignited an inner strength in David that had been simmering just beneath the surface. He straightened, meeting the gaze head-on. "If I'm wrong, I will embrace it as a lesson. Growth doesn't stem from infallibility, it comes from grappling with our failures and learning." As the executive regarded him, David felt the essential shift brewing within himself, no longer just a leader managing change, but a creator of possibilities. He was ready to transform not only the organization, but himself as well. And just as he felt the tide turn, the unexpected happened. A second executive entered the room, bringing with him a ream of questions. David's heart raced again, anxiety bubbling up once more. What new challenges awaited him? And could he navigate this unforeseen confrontation while maintaining his newfound resolve? The moment had arrived, and the stakes were higher than he could have imagined. In the days that followed, David found himself engulfed in a whirlwind of activity, a flurry of meetings, discussions, and revisions fueled by an unwavering determination to see his vision through. The presence of the heavyweight executive loomed over him, a reminder that his journey towards change was not solely about convincing skeptics, but also about reinforcing his newfound role as a transformative leader. The second executive, a seasoned strategist with a reputation for cutting through the noise, latched onto David's proposal with a gaze that pierced through the atmosphere. "David, your enthusiasm is admirable," he began, his voice smooth but edged with caution. "But let us speak plainly. You're courting risk, and our stakeholders will not be as forgiving as you hope." David's mind raced. He knew that doubts about the proposal were valid. He'd encountered obstacles before. Yet, Something within him unfurled a deep-rooted confidence that had been nurtured in the conversations with Sarah and the support from his colleagues. "I respect your perspective," he replied, grounding himself in the moment. "But significant growth is accompanied by risk. What we gain in innovation and diversity far outweighs the fear of stepping into the unknown." The room pulsed with tension. He could see nods and furrowed brows among both the supporters and naysayers. David knew he had to pivot the discourse. This was no longer just about defending an idea. It was about conveying his belief in a future where the organization thrived by nurturing potential. "Consider this," David continued, his voice steady. "The current landscape rewards agility and responsiveness. If we continue on the same path, we will be outpaced by competitors willing to delve into the unfamiliar. By prioritizing mentorship and a commitment to community engagement, we enable ourselves to not just react, but to lead." The heavyweight executive shifted in their seat, and David seized the moment, pressing forward. "We cannot view change merely through the lens of immediate returns. That has confined the company's growth trajectory for too long. We need to invest in long-term foundations that yield sustainable growth." As David's vision materialized through his words, he felt an electrifying connection with the audience, a shared energy that could tip the scales in his favor. Questions peppered his presentation like a storm raging across the horizon. Could they really sustain this momentum? Would stakeholders see the value in prioritizing people over profit, or would they recoil from potential setbacks? Yet with each inquiry arose the opportunity to redefine the narrative, to turn discomfort into opportunity, not just for himself, but for everyone engaged in this intricate dance of change. As his presentation wove through debates, he noticed a shift happen within the skeptics. The reluctance that had initially permeated the room began to give way to intrigue. One board member, previously quiet, raised a hand. "What key performance indicators will you use to measure success? If we're going to embark on this voyage, we need concrete data." "Exactly." David beamed, an opportunity crystallizing before him. "We'll establish both quantitative and qualitative metrics, from engagement rates to community feedback. But feedback loops will be integral. We must continuously adapt based on what we learn and recalibrate our strategies accordingly." By inviting the board into his framework, he emboldened them as stakeholders in this endeavor, bridging the gap between ambition and accountability. As conversation sparked, sunlight streamed through window panes, bathing the room in warmth. An atmosphere once thick with apprehension now breathed hope. Finally, as the dialogue reached an uplifting crescendo, David felt a tinge of gratitude wash over him. The board's apprehension began to ebb, and with it, an undeniable truth settled in his heart. This journey had transformed him as much as it aimed to transform the organization. He was no longer merely a cog in a vast corporate machine. He had evolved into a catalyst for positive change. The pivotal meeting culminated in a vote, an overwhelming majority in favor of piloting the mentorship program. It was not just a win for David. It was a victory for every voice that had joined the chorus for a brighter future. The moment felt monumental, as though he had not merely crossed a finish line, but had constructed a bridge to something greater. As David stepped outside the high-rise the following day, the bustling city buzzed around him like a vibrant heartbeat. He reflected on how far he had come from a businessman overly concerned with status to a leader willing to embrace vulnerability, with the power to effect meaningful change. With a solid confidence coursing through him, he stepped back into a world alive with possibilities. He now stood with the recognition of his competence as a leader, poised not just to navigate the complexities ahead, but to inspire others to rise alongside him. The moment he had fought for had arrived, and with it, personal fulfillment transformed a once abstract concept into something tangible. David no longer felt like an imposter in his own life. He had firmly established his position, a clear testament that true leadership not only welcomes change, but thrives on it. Now, as he walked forward into a new chapter, David knew he was equipped not only with strategy, but also with passion, purpose, and a contagious spirit of resilience. You need to subscribe now to the channel to follow every exclusive emotional story. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and spread these powerful journeys. Comment your reactions and theories about this conclusion. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformative ending. Don't wait even one more second to share.